In this episode,
my gut, once I understood the science behind the gut-brain axis, I started to think clearer. I started to treat my body better. I felt just a lot more regulated and grounded in my body instead of constantly feeling disconnected from it, as I had since the time I was trying to force feed myself.
Exactly.
The issue with these quick fix weight gain meal plans is you're trying to fit as many calories and as much energy as possible into as little food as possible. So in a way, even though I just talked about how processed foods are not incredibly good for you, especially the ultra processed foods, it did play a part in a way, and I'm grateful for it, in my journey to just getting the weight up. But it also comes with this whole onslaught of chemicals and numbers and other weird things which were probably wreaking havoc to my gut, and thus causing that disconnect entirely between the gut and the brain.
Welcome to Gut Instinct. I'm Evan. Gut Instinct is a podcast series where we interview leading scientists and entrepreneurs on issues such as gut health, wellness, the food and healthcare industry, following your energy, and living a holistic and balanced life. Gut Instinct is sponsored by Wellsprout. Our guest in this episode is Dr. Alexandra Lim. Dr. Alexandra Lim is the lead scientist at Wellsprout, responsible for product innovation and gut health. Dr. Lim completed her Ph.D. at the University of Oxford with her thesis on peripheral biomarkers, including gut-derived amino acids and lipids. Dr. Lim's area of expertise covers gut-brain science and how balanced health systems support both wellness and resilience. Dr. Lim is currently also managing clinical partnerships for Amelie, which has the largest Southeast Asian microbiome database globally. Dr. Lim also completed a master's in clinical research in human nutrition at the Imperial College London. Her upcoming book, Gutsy, covers her personal journey as well as professional insights into the gut-brain connection. Thank you for joining us, Alex.
No, thank you, Evan. That was an incredibly comprehensive introduction that I couldn't pull off myself, so thanks for that.
Hope I did you justice.
Oh, you did.
All right. Okay, so for the first question, I would like to get a better understanding of how you got into gut health in the first place and went into this line.
Yeah, absolutely. I first became interested in gut health generally as a concept during my master's in human nutrition. I was very interested in phytochemicals, things like sulforaphane in broccoli and very niche specific named compounds like that, and how it affects your metabolism and then also brain health. And that kind of became also my interest for my doctorate. So how do these physiological systems affect cognitive health and also your emotional health? And that's also why I ended up looking into the gut-brain axis, and not just gut health from the digestion, food absorption point of view, but how it actually links to other systems in the body, and importantly and significantly to brain systems. And that's how I segued into gut health as the core of these health parameters generally. Yeah.
Makes sense. So on that topic, I guess it'll be good to understand a bit more about the thesis that you wrote during your PhD. So the title of your paper was, correct me if I'm wrong, Investigating Peripheral Metabolites and Lipids as Potential Biomarkers for Major Depressive Disorder, which is, I guess, exactly like you shared about the gut-brain connection. How did you decide on this thesis topic, and what were some of the findings you had, and what did you find surprising?
Yeah, I got to rewind back to all those years ago when I was trying to formulate an interesting topic that was also in some way personally relevant to me, and hopefully at the same time applicable to many other people who could learn from my findings. It shifted a lot during the course of my education. So I started off wanting to look at specific nutrients and compounds and how they affect brain health, as I said earlier. And then it sort of shifted into how these physiological systems in our body, including that of gut health, can affect the brain. And so it kind of went from more looking at isolated things in isolated systems and how that affects a certain outcome, in psychiatry to how whole body processes and the like compounds involved in these integrated systems affect outcomes. And I was interested in nutrition as a whole and also metabolic health. And I thought, okay, what are the components of metabolism? And that's metabolites, things like proteins, amino acids, lipids, carbohydrates. How do all these things affect the way we think, the way we move through the world generally? And as I was doing my study, I came across a really, really interesting database called the Twins database. And we've talked about this before. And it's very cool because in the Twins database, you essentially control for the genetic factor, which means you can investigate all the other variables that are contributing to this outcome you're interested in.
Because they are identical genetically.
Yeah, so they would either share half of their genes or 100% of their genes if they're identical twins.
Yes.
So it was just such an interesting database to look at because the variables covered so many, and it didn't just rest with things like lipids and proteins and that kind of thing, but it was also everyday lifestyle factors that affect you and me. So it was interesting from a personal perspective because it's like, oh, how does my exercise and my diet and my smoking and my drinking habits, how do all these things come together and affect the way I am? And so that's what really interested me. And as I was doing my analysis, which was basically a mix of animal studies, and sadly, because it was COVID, I couldn't do actual human trials as I wanted, but I managed to use this study as a really good reference source. And what I found was there were like elevated types of lipids, as well as other metabolites, which I may get into later, that were correlated to one's predisposition to getting major depressive disorder. And this hit a personal note in me because I was going through some things which were making me have low mood in a way. And it got to the point where even my professor was like, are you okay? Like, you can take a break if you're burnt out. I noticed something has changed. It did coincide with COVID and that isolation during quarantine, so there's definitely an overlap there. And as many of you guys would know, there was a mental health epidemic during and throughout COVID and also after. And so it was a very almost, I'd say, serendipitous time to investigate all these variables. And then there were other personal things in my life, like a not so great relationship and struggling to figure out what I really wanted to do with my career that were also contributing to this low mood, not feeling incredibly motivated. So ironically, I was studying the very thing that was afflicting myself. And there's also a bit of history of that in my family. So I thought, okay, this is important. I want to know what's going on a metabolic, on a phenotypic level, instead of just figuring out what is the next drug we can make to smooth over these symptoms which come up. Because with typical antidepressants, I'm not against them. I think they have a role to play in traditional therapy, but the relapse rate is incredibly high. So what happens is you take these antidepressants and maybe in the medium to long term, you relapse and you might need an even higher dose just to maintain living okay day to day in the far future. And so I thought, okay, let's get to the real core of this. What are the networks that overlap here? What are the physiological signals that we are ignoring or overriding that could really be brought to the surface and embraced and lead to better therapeutic options that can be adjuncts to what already exists? So this is my...
Just to clarify there, so when you said physiological, so are you sort of making a sort of distinction between, let's say, what people would typically think of as mental health considerations versus physiological indicators of how the mental health is being compromised, or what do you mean by that sort of physiological?
What I really meant was I wanted to find more than just a Band-Aid solution to the mental health epidemic. It is so much easier to resort to an SSRI or an anxiolytic because it's there and you can pay for it easily, and then the effects are like that. I just wanted to go beneath the surface to see what actual lifestyle habits we can incorporate into our day-to-day life that can further enhance this therapy we're all trying to optimize. So but to bring it back to the original topic of the thesis title, I found in this huge database that there were elevated things in relation to someone's susceptibility to depression. And I thought, this is really interesting. I wonder why. And that also overlapped with my interest in gut health, because things that are derived from the gut or come from the gut can affect levels of these fats, these proteins, these amino acids that consequently affect your brain health. So I thought, this is such an interesting integrated ecosystem that needs to be looked in more, because there aren't many conversations, or at least back then, I don't remember coming across many of them, that need to be had around metabolism and healthy physical and emotional health.
And I think that's where what's so interesting about gut health is how it's such a holistic way of approaching the issue. And I think this would be a good point to sort of dive deeper into this topic, since you've this is exactly what your thesis is about as well, right? That I think mental health, people have been exploring this mindfulness journeys. A lot of people are thinking a lot about therapy. People also who might be suffering with brain disorders might be on certain drugs, prescription drugs that are there to help them cope with that. What is it that the gut connection to the brain brings into this debate, or maybe this discourse that I guess isn't so well known yet in the mainstream? What would you like people watching this and listening to this to understand about how the gut-brain connection actually is a very key consideration of the mental health challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, if you asked me this 10 years ago, well, 10 years ago, I didn't really embark on any of this research, but 10 or 20 years ago, if you asked another expert, they would say, I don't know if there's enough robust evidence to substantiate this gut-brain connection in relation to something as severe as major depressive disorder or bipolar or schizophrenia. Interestingly enough, my supervisor was looking more into schizophrenia research and how probiotics for the gut can help that. So it was quite interesting research, and just knowing about that made me think, this is already happening. Why not do more research in this specific field? And I'd say in the field of gut-brain research, there's a lot of things to discuss, but essentially the gut communicates directly and indirectly with the brain. And it's this bidirectional communication which makes it quite special. We have a vagus nerve that extends from the brainstem, and it innervates a lot of our organs, but it also includes the gut. So the gut, being this huge ecosystem, is a very huge part of this vagus nerve body connection as a whole. And our guts have 500 million neurons living inside it. So it's this incredibly intricate, complicated nervous system in and of itself. And these neurons relay sensory information and information about the gut generally, whether it's how stretched out it is from a meal, how mobile it is, so the motility of your gut. All this kind of sensory information is picked up by these cells and then relayed up the nerve to our brain. And it relays this information up to many different parts of the brain, whether it's the prefrontal cortex, which controls your main cognitive processes and executive functioning and decision making, or the more emotional, almost subconscious parts of your brain, like the amygdala or the insula and nuclei that live inside your brainstem. And in a similar fashion, your brain also collates and processes all of this information that comes from the gut to produce a response. Now, we have what's called the HPA axis, which is the hypopituitary adrenal axis. And I just call it the stress axis because it's much easier to say.
Thanks, that's
And
good.
I'm just going to call it the stress axis. And once all this information is processed by the brain, it affects the activity of this stress axis, thus affecting the output of our main stress hormone, which is cortisol. And this cortisol hormone is usually existent in an abnormal state or abnormal level in different mental disorders, be it anxiety or depression, like mood disorders like that, but also disorders which overlap with these mental health disorders, such as eating disorders and whatnot, and also gut-related disorders such as IBS or IBD. It's very common to have what you may consider just a physical health issue, such as a bad gut, bloatedness and whatever, and think of it as purely a physical issue, like, oh, I'm eating the wrong things and my gut has just gone off the rails, I don't know what's happening. When really it overlaps quite heavily with a mental health disorder and the stress output of our brains. And so that is the link between our gut and the brain.
And it goes both ways, doesn't it?
And it goes both ways, yeah. So if we're stressed and this HPA axis, this stress axis is activated, it can then cause that bloating, that constipation, that distended gut that you probably only associate with food or the like, when really it's due to stress. And stress management in a way is something I like to preach heavily about, because it's such an underrated tool in managing your gut health and your brain health and the communication clarity between your gut and brain.
Yeah, great. No, thanks for sharing that, Alex.
Hope that's not too long-winded.
No, there's so many threads now just running through my head about where we could actually take this in. And I think before you mentioned the stress part, which I would like to dive deeper into soon, but just to sort of finish off that mental health thread, perhaps I'm not sure if there are many therapists out there that would necessarily be talking about mental health from a gut perspective. I know the therapists that I've encountered don't. So who are the right authorities, or perhaps who are the people that would be good reference points for how to think about gut health and mental health as a holistic approach? Is it maybe a nutritionist that would be able to be better positioned to help advise on this front, or how would you go about getting the right advice? Because especially how the microbiome is so personal, right? For the gut, how should somebody go about getting the right inputs and advice from professionals about how to approach this problem of how the gut and the brain are actually so interdependent, and how to nurture good mental health and gut health simultaneously?
That's an excellent question, because I don't think, to be honest, there are too many specialists you can go to to know about those things.
Yeah.
Though I must say, during my work at Amelie, I talked to a lot of different kinds of specialists.
Yeah.
I talked to GPs, I talked to psychologists, I talked to psychiatrists, people who are very heavily invested in brain health, emotional health, how to optimize it, not necessarily just with your typical traditional treatments. So that's a very optimistic thing, especially in a more conservative nation state like Singapore. But I would say that from my experience, most doctors are still quite close-minded with having this gut-brain axis, or simply just the gut, as a therapeutic target for these treatments, for these disorders, I mean.
Yeah.
That said, I would say the open-minded psychologists and psychiatrists, and even your general practitioner, and of course your gastroenterologists, are usually quite open to looking at alternatives, not to replace what they're already doing, but to complement their existing practice. I would say maybe 50% of all the doctors I've seen are interested in looking into the gut as a therapeutic target, open to using holistic remedies or targeted probiotics to optimize this gut-brain signaling, gut health generally, to optimize the brain health outcome. So they're there. I would say it's you gotta sort of look around and try as many places as you can before coming to that decision. Though I do think if you explore more of these up-and-coming longevity and wellness centers, they usually live there.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because I think what happens is they have their private practice, maybe with a hospital, and they're interested enough in the longevity movement and the gut health movement so as to work with another place as well that specializes in that. So that's why I would say go to these wellness centers where you typically may not go to as the first resort if it comes to your gut problem or your brain problem. Because there's usually, more often than not, a doctor who lives there and wants to go through a consultation with you and try to understand what's happening from a more holistic perspective.
Interesting. So it sounds like, other than these wellness centers, perhaps it's still an emerging area that it needs an interdisciplinary approach to this, where maybe you have the psychologists, the doctors, the nutritionists, maybe based in the same wellness center that can actually advise on this, given that it pulls on all these different areas of expertise.
Yes, exactly. And typically at these centers, they sell holistic packages in a way. And you look at these words and it's like, oh, holistic, what does that mean? Do I need to get acupuncture, or I get a massage and everything's okay? Not really. It typically entails some kind of blood tests, maybe a stool test, which in this case analyzes the components of your gut and sees how well you score according to certain functional pathways. Or it may involve like a DEXA scan, so it scans your body and sees what your like lean muscle mass is, your visceral fat percentage, things like that. And these are all very important metrics to know when it comes to health and longevity. And I apologize, I just threw out the word longevity randomly, I realize, but that's because when I think about gut health, I do automatically think about longevity as a whole, because we have found classes of bacteria associated with slower aging, and we even have what's called the gut microbiome age. This is all stuff grounded in science too. The idea being that we have these pattern changes and shifts as we age. It's not a bad thing, but we typically don't want to age too quickly as we get older, with regards to the gut microbiome age. So,
yeah, great. On that topic of longevity and the gut, what are some of the findings that have stood out from the research in this area about how you mentioned the gut microbiome age versus the chronological age. On that topic, how should people think about their health of the gut and their longevity prospects, perhaps, to put it that way?
Yeah, I'd say the most standout finding is this contrast between your chronological age and your so-called microbiome age. Bear in mind, even though I think it's interesting research, I do think there's a little bit more that can be done to fully substantiate it, because like at Amelie, we mostly draw from a Southeast Asian database, and this could very well be different in other parts of the world, in Europe, or maybe even other parts of Asia, like Japan or China, for example. So I still think it's a standout finding, because generally we find that the gut microbiome age follows quite linearly the chronological age. And if there's a discrepancy, it usually is because of a metabolic issue someone is suffering from, such as insulin resistance, obesity, or diabetes. And if not, we don't see that gap very much. And what's really interesting is in these reports that we have, we can look at your gut microbiome age, and we also score you on 3 different functional pathways that all indicate your point towards your overall metabolic health generally. And we have found that in the reports for people who don't have such a discrepancy between chronological and gut age, they typically don't have the inflammatory or stress markers that hint towards something like a metabolic issue such as insulin resistance or even type 2 diabetes, for example. Still collecting data every day, and the data set is evolving, but it's interesting to observe these patterns as well. So yeah, I'd say that's the most standout aspect. Inflammation is inversely related to longevity, and there are markers in our gut that can tell us about this. Usually markers related to oxidative stress and stress as a whole, and antioxidant activity that is also derived from your gut. So if you don't have these markers, it typically means you could be more susceptible to these longevity related diseases as well.
Okay, and I think this could be an interesting point to understand a bit more, because you talked about what you found when the chronological, feel free to grab some water if you want, for the people who have their chronological age and their microbiome age being pretty close. And I guess there are some cases where perhaps the microbiome age might be, I guess a good scenario would be they're more youthful than their chronological age, perhaps?
Yeah, that's correct.
What was it about those individuals that you saw that was different about perhaps maybe their diet, or maybe something about the way their body composition works? What were they doing right, basically?
Oh, I should preface by saying I haven't really met many of these individuals in person, but as part of this test, you do have to fill in a questionnaire that assesses your food intolerances, maybe your allergies, things you generally can't tolerate in the body. But that's limited information. I'm still not so sure about their exercise or maybe real dietary habits, because perhaps they are allergic to nuts and they don't eat a whole bunch of things. But there is something inexplicable that makes them quite strong and resilient in the report, because we have seen conflicting results, so-called anomalies in these data sets. We have people who eat hawker food almost every single day, and somehow their functional pathway scores are pretty okay.
Interesting.
But then maybe it's because they've already built the foundations for a very resilient gut at a young age. They've got a strong immune system, and so they can tolerate all kinds of foods in the gut and are not as affected by the occasional greasy treat, you could say. But But the overall pattern remains. Generally, these people who've got a young, happy gut microbiome are typically people who are generally already quite fit and healthy. They have a habit of movement, a regular movement. They incorporate gut-friendly foods into their diets. This is a tricky one to navigate because there's been a lot of research on gut health, how certain food types affect the gut, which is why I don't like centering the discourse around gut health around just food, because gut health is so much more than food types, nutrients, phytochemicals. It is a lot more beyond that, such as your stress resilience, the stresses you're exposed to on a day-to-day basis, and how well you manage that stress. And all that combined with your diet affects your metabolic makeup and how you feel on a day-to-day basis as well. So yeah, just to bring it back, I think they're generally quite fit and healthy people. They eat pretty well, they exercise, and in some cases they're not thinking about food specifically that much. They're cautious of it, but they're not stressed out by it. And that stress in itself may cause all those things you don't want. So it's a bit ironic and amusing in a way. Yeah, that's the general pattern.
To perhaps push you a little bit on this to get your view, right? Nature versus nurture. Do you have a take on which predominates when it comes to this, or and perhaps is there a way to, I guess, is it genetics that will be a big determinant in this situation, or is somebody who perhaps when they were young had a bad gut microbiome, maybe they could have done a fecal transplant or something later on in life, and to fix that, how should we think about it when it comes to nature versus nurture?
You clearly know plenty about the gut microbiome, I must say, things like fecal transplant. I do think your environment plays the biggest part.
Okay.
Not to say that there's not a role for these things which can be done, such as a fecal transplant when you're a baby, and there have been really incredible results from things like that, such as fecal transplants in toddlers, in young children with ADHD and brain-based disorders, and then as early as a couple of weeks later, you see a drastic reduction in the symptoms they were suffering from. And we've got case studies like that at Amelie, so it's really interesting to see and to understand and make sense of these results. I would say our environment does dictate a lot of it, though. Objectively, the microbiomes we have now are maybe 50% similar to what they used to be hundreds of years ago. And that's because of industrialization. We now all live in cities with pollution and ultra-processed foods. All of these, by default, will have completely changed our gut microbiomes. So the way we are now
For the better or worse?
For worse.
Okay, just to clarify.
For worse. And these issues can be rectified by transplanting a healthy, new and fresh microbiome into your so-called diseased, industrialized city microbiome. But there are things that you can do on a day-to-day basis that don't involve a transplant that can radically shift this gut microbiome. And the goal is to have a diverse one. Generally with a diverse microbiome, meaning you've got different types of bacteria species that live in your gut. This is linked to healthy outcomes overall. And that's regardless of the disease subtype, whether that's a mental health issue or a metabolic issue. And typically these overlap on a pathophysiological basis, so that's no surprise there. And with industrialization and this stuff you find in the supermarket every single day, those are the things which lower the diversity. So you're doing the opposite of what you want. And you can counter this by simply being more aware of what you're putting into your body and reducing the stress that you're exposed to. because stress itself literally changes the microbial makeup of your gut, and you're not even aware of it because you just feel, I should just push through it and bulldoze my way through all this work and not take breaks. And you don't know the physiological changes it's actually doing to your body and to your mind.
That's why the importance of listening to your gut, I guess.
Exactly. And a lot of people like to blame the stress that they experience in work or just other life factors, essentially anything external, without going internally. They don't understand just how profound the gut and gut health is to the way that they're living and moving through the world, and hence their overall quality of life. Take women on their periods, for example. It's very true that with premenstrual syndrome, and also during perimenopause, when you're about to lose your period entirely, that your hormones are all over the place and it affects your mood. But what a lot of women also don't realize is that things that they put into their body and the stress that they're subject to every day at work also can exacerbate those symptoms they're trying to get rid of on a mood basis, I'd say. So our guts also produce these things called short-chain fatty acids, which directly affect inflammation in the body and the brain because of that aforementioned gut-brain signaling. And that directly contributes to a worse mood, and you just go about your life and day-to-day things very differently, as opposed to if you paid attention to this gut-brain connection and how you're treating your gut as a whole.
Got it. And I wanted to pick your brain a little bit on what you were just mentioning there about the diversity of the microbiome, and what's the role of fiber and prebiotics in this space.
Yes, totally. Fiber and prebiotics are important, and I think every conversation that involves gut health and nutrition needs to include this. And I mentioned this in the first place because things like the keto and carnivore diet have become huge. I'm not against them per se, because I've seen some incredibly impressive results, short-term and medium-term. But it's the long-term effects which we're not totally sure of. So if you're 80 years old and you happen to be on a carnivore diet and you're doing incredibly well, that's great. Please hit me up. I want to know your bloods and everything. But until we get to that point, and until we have enough people to give us that data, we're not so sure about that. We've been living on things like plants and fruit that have fiber since the dawn of time, really. And the role that these prebiotic fibers or prebiotic foods play for our gut is they are the literal food for our gut. Without prebiotics, we are not nourishing and replenishing the bacteria that we want to stay in our guts. And another interesting thing to note is that a lot of different foods have prebiotics, such as chia seeds, you've got kimchi. There are so many different types of fibers and foods that have this component to nourish your gut. But this is also region specific. So just because you don't have access to things like chicory, which has inulin, and that's a very common prebiotic, it doesn't mean that you're doomed and you're not going to have a healthy gut. You need to know what's around you, what are the nutritional components and compounds that you can find very easily. They are not meant to be inaccessible and crazy expensive and only available in some exotic health food store that's like 5,000 miles away from you. It doesn't have to be that way. And I'm a big proponent of prebiotic foods, because since I've incorporated it into my own lifestyle, I just feel a lot better. I'm a lot more regular. And that's a good sign of good gut health, by the way. You're pretty regular. You should be going anything between once a day to 3 or 4 times a week, really. And if you're on that page, then you're pretty good to go.
Excellent advice. Do take note of that. And that's the criteria we should be keeping in mind. Yes, and I think when you were just talking about the situation with our guts needing this fiber, the prebiotics, in order to make sure that it's thriving, there's actually an interesting statistic or figure here that I'd like to get your thoughts on. And it says that basically there's more genes in the gut microbiome than the human genome, in the order of like more than 100x more genes in the gut microbiome than the human genome. And I've seen some articles joke, I think they're joking, that we're basically more microbe than human.
Yeah.
And knowing that the gut is such a key factor in all these different organs of the body, the gut-brain axis, the gut-skin axis, the gut-lung axis, how it impacts the heart, metabolism. How do we make sense of this? How do we understand what it means to have, what is a picture of good health?
Yeah.
If you have a great, you just mentioned the regularity there. What are some other indicators that your gut health is great? And how do we think about this fact that there's so many more microbes in us than there are human genes?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And you're right, we are more microbe than human, really. I think we're moving through the world thinking, okay, I'm very conscious of my life. I'm conscious of how I go about my day-to-day life. But I have pretty controversial theory that at the root of our own consciousness is our guts.
Interesting.
I don't think that it controls maybe every literal aspect of our lives, but I do think that it sits at the root of a lot of our conscious behavior.
So it's as if the guts are pulling the levers in our body?
Yes. So
I mean, they do say the gut is the second brain as well, right?
Yeah. And I have a personal story in relation to this. And of course, it's still an untested hypothesis. It's only me and I'm one person, n equals 1. Still worthy.
Possible thesis for other people who are interested to take this up.
Yeah. But when I was I'll get into the hypothesis quickly. I'll try to get through the story quickly as well. But,
sure.
When I was in high school, I had sort of an eating disorder that I didn't have the language for. And I really didn't have the language for it because I believe the signaling between my gut and the brain at that time was very unclear. And I did eat, which is why at the time I didn't think I had an issue. But I had this perpetual feeling of feeling like even half full, and I would stop. And it was very worrying for like my family and friends around me. And I would deny it because I'm like, it's fine, like I'm still eating. There's nothing really wrong. And my mom would say, yeah, you are, but you're hardly eating anything. Like you took like 2 bites of dinner and you went to your room and that's it. And so I refused to admit there was a problem until people around me started to comment on it. And I was seriously withering away to nothing. I was maybe like 10 kilos underweight. And I was applying to university and I really wanted to go abroad. I wanted to have fun and experience a new life in university. And then things came to a head when my mom said, you can go overseas and I think it would be a good experience, but I don't really trust you to be healthy by yourself in like a totally new environment. Like I'm really worried for you. And I remember she was kind of like on the verge of tears and I was going, oh my God, like why is she getting so emotional about this? It's not a big deal. But that's also when I realized I have to do something about it. At the time, I didn't understand like the biological underpinnings of the gut and the gut-brain axis and all these things yet. So my solution was very efficient. I just force-fed my way up to healthy weight. I went to interestingly, I won't disclose her name, but I went to a psychologist who gave me basically a meal plan, but there was no counseling or therapy to accompany this meal plan. It was just the goal is to get your weight up. And I can see where she was coming from because she wanted to restore the the physical weight before the mental stuff came into play. And I think a lot of that is a tactic that a lot of psychologists use in trying to treat eating disorders. But when I was going through the motions of just having these 300, 500 calorie smoothies and huge meals that I just didn't enjoy after a while because it felt like I was force feeding myself, I did very much feel a disconnect between my stomach, my intestines, and what was going on up here in my brain. I just thought to myself, oh, what the heck? I just need to be healthy enough so I can go overseas and I'll do whatever it takes. So it worked. But as I was going through the motions of undergrad and master's and then later on my PhD, I didn't, this mind-body disconnect continued. Like it continued for far too long. I would go through these binge restrict cycles where I would eat a lot just to feel full, and no surprise because I had to have like 3,000 calories just to get my weight up when I was so underweight and thin. And I think that in itself somehow distorted that signaling between my gut and the way I felt. And this continued for far too long. And it's only when I got into the science of gut health and trying to fix it on my own that I realized, oh my goodness, there's some clarification going on here. I can feel the signaling become clearer. I feel like I'm thinking differently. My gut is behaving differently. This is not science fiction anymore. I'm feeling it myself, and I'm also reading it in the papers online. So there is a very real, very tangible connection between the gut and the brain. And as I was trying to deep dive more, I was thinking about this gut-brain relationship specifically. And early on, I mentioned this vagus nerve, right, which transmits signals from the gut to the brain. And these signals do shoot up to parts of the brain that give us like a sort of intuition. And that includes the insula, the anterior cingulate cortex, and the brainstem nuclei, aside from many others, which at this point in time are not at the top of my head. So I do apologize. And when the brain processes these signals and spits something out, it also relays the signals to the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that activates before we actually do something. And so the order of events is gut, insula, and it's a very easy name to remember because insula equals intuition, or that's how I remember it anyway. And then prefrontal cortex. So in a way, if you think about it, it is kind of like dictating our conscious experience because it's going to these parts of the brain which gives us this intuition and almost subconscious recognition of patterns and of the world around us before we relay it to the part of the brain that actually makes us do something.
Before we could even be consciously aware of it, maybe.
Exactly. And of course, this is dependent also on our emotional behavior, the emotional inputs at the time of the action, our past, maybe something in our past has contributed to this intuition, obviously, because that's how we recognize patterns. They all come from patterns we've recognized in our own history, our own past. But the gut relaying this information to the brain must also play a very big part because it communicates directly with these parts of the brains. So I'm not really surprised that once I healed my gut, once I understood the science behind the gut-brain axis, I started to think clearer, I started to treat my body better, I felt just a lot more regulated and grounded in my body instead of constantly feeling disconnected from it as I had since the time I was trying to force feed myself.
Exactly.
So that's just a personal insight. And I'm hoping that a lot more people have similar personal insights. Unfortunately for me, it took an eating disorder to realize, but I'm also at a point in my life where if I was to not feel at my best, whether that's emotionally or physically, my first point of call is the gut, and optimizing that as the first strategy.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that very personal story. I think it could mean a lot to people who might be in a similar situation going through something like that. And if you don't mind me asking, if you were to say, look at that meal plan that was given to you those many years ago, knowing what you know now, what are your thoughts about that? And how do you think it could have been perhaps approached differently?
Yeah, for sure. Involvement of psychotherapy or some kind of therapy and counseling would have been quite good. I don't think I got that or got enough of it.
So it was treated as two separate things rather than a complete way of addressing it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And the meal plan itself, it wasn't very strict actually. It was pretty flexible. So that was nice because I was doing an internship and I was eating canteen food. It was very hard to control for what I ate on a day-to-day basis. And preparing for it, in hindsight, would have just taken way too long because the internship took a lot of hours of the day. But the issue with these quick fix weight gain meal plans is you're trying to fit as many calories and as much energy as possible into as little food as possible. So in a way, even though I just talked about how processed foods are not incredibly good for you, especially the ultra processed foods, it did play a part in a way, and I'm grateful for it, in my journey to just getting the weight up. But it also comes with this whole onslaught of chemicals and E numbers and other weird things which were probably wreaking havoc to my gut and thus causing that disconnect entirely between the gut and the brain. So I'm not completely against aspects of this meal plan, but I do think limiting the processed part of it would have been healthier and more sustainable. And I think I depended a bit too heavily on processed foods afterwards because I got so used to eating it in the form of these thick shakes and like bread snacks that I would shove down my throat during this time. And so that's not good either. I'm really hoping that some alternative can be made with these meal plans. So it's hard, you see, because I'm on the one hand very grateful for this time in which I could really get my weight up. If I didn't, I wouldn't have been able to go to university. I only had like a few months to try this plan out. But on the other hand, I'm sure there must be a different way, a more gut and brain friendly way to do it. And I think that a movement needs to be put in place in the healthcare industry in Singapore, both the private and public sector, to push for something that's a bit more beneficial.
More gut friendly, at least.
More gut friendly, at least. Yeah, we should put Wellsprout in the meal plan.
Thank you. But that was excellent sharing. Thank you so much for taking us through that journey that you were on.
No worries at all.
And also helping us to see that perhaps there could be a different way. Maybe that's what's needed. Perhaps a gut health first meal plan that could actually then help to restore the gut-brain connection, perhaps. It's not something that's really thought of enough with the way the industry works now. Actually, on that note, what do you feel is missing in the way the healthcare industry, the food industry is approaching, say, their lack of awareness of gut health issues, perhaps?
Yeah, good question. I can, in a way, split that into two parts. Because I do feel like the healthcare and the food industries are usually at loggerheads with each other in a way, so that either can make more money. I'll start with the food industry, and I'm going to tie it back to those ultra-processed foods, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, the food industry doesn't prioritize your gut health.
Clear answer right there.
Yeah, it prioritizes ingredients which are shelf stable so they can last longer.
Increasing of shelf life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It prioritizes convenience, which I guess is tied into the stable shelf life aspect of it, over new nutritional compounds and the liveliness of these compounds. So food scientists are very clever. They know how to mix the right ratios of fat and salt and sugar to create this ultimate pleasurable taste. And I'm all for pleasure, that's part of my own ethos. But if you have chronic intake of this, not only does it damage your gut, but you almost need more of it just to reach that same level of satisfaction each time. So the novelty factor of these foods kind of wear away after a while as well. And you get
And then you need more of it perhaps to get to that same pleasure?
Yeah, in a way. So you go from maybe having a row of Cadbury or whatever chocolate you like to maybe needing the whole bar because you're like, oh, well, yeah, like my gut's used to this one row now. I need more of it so I can actually taste more of that sweetness. And you're slowly numbing your body to the pleasure it would otherwise receive. Yeah. So I'd say it's the deprioritization of the wrong things in the food industry. And in conjunction with this problem is the issue of not being able to read labels generally from our point of view. And I didn't grow up with this knowledge either. I didn't know how to read a label. I didn't know how to choose an unprocessed food. I thought, oh, this, pack of almonds, they're nuts, right? They must be good for me. And not to say nuts aren't good for you, but in the packaged sweet kinds, no, they weren't really good for me. And in Asia, we have a lot of processed bread, which I really enjoy. Actually, as a child, I grew up with them, and I think there's a place for them. But it's not even really bread. It's sort of flour mixed with chemicals and water and sugar. And it tastes great, but if you eat that every single day, twice a day, you are not going to reap the benefits of the protein that this flour package has encased. So it's really, really not good for you. And most people, for the sake of convenience, choose these because it's prepackaged. It's in a nice, pretty little plastic thing that you can just open whenever you want, and you don't have to think about it.
It's convenience, but at what cost?
Exactly. It's at the cost of your longevity and the quality of your life. And processed foods can also eat away at your gut lining slowly, which means you have more of that inflammatory signaling and release of these inflammatory signals from the gut to the brain. And this also affects your brain health in a huge, huge way.
And quickly there, right, when you were talking about the processed foods, I wanted to get your thoughts on how to think about calories and nutrients. I remember reading somewhere that suggested that foods that actually spoil faster are more likely to be higher in nutrients because perhaps there's less preservatives in them and all. So how should we be thinking about calories and nutrients in our foods?
Oh, for sure, nutrients over calories. You can get these very low calorie, highly not nutritious foods anywhere, such as your typical protein bar or cereal bar. So they're like, 50 calories, but then you have a bunch of chemicals in there which mess up your gut and brain and don't really actually give you the results you want anyway. I'm also not a big fan of relying heavily on calorie counting because it's simply not very accurate. The way calories are counted in the lab, that method is accurate. But with the labeling system, it can be off anywhere between like 30 to 50%. So something that's 70 calories could very well be less, or 90 calories. And it's just not a very good gauge of energy intake. What's more important is the nutritional component and, in a way, macronutrients as well. Aside from fiber, I think protein is incredibly underrated, and there is plenty of discourse around protein now, which almost makes it tiring to hear about, because everyone's like, oh yeah, protein again, like I don't even want to think about it. Obviously we need protein for muscle, but did you also know you need protein for your gut? Like, protein is need to literally make the chemicals, the neurotransmitters that come from your gut, and our actual gut lining, structurally it needs protein as well. So if you don't have enough of that, you don't have as resilient of a gut as you want. And you have less of that robust signaling as well, because it's needed to make the neurotransmitters such as dopamine and serotonin and GABA that relay all that are relayed to the brain. So yes, very underrated aside from fiber. And protein has an incredibly important role to play. Protein does contribute to calories, but you're better off having a high protein, high fibrous meal as opposed to just a low calorie salad, because you're getting the brain and body benefits from the protein, and protein itself takes energy to break down. So you're kind of hitting two birds with one stone there.
Now a word from our sponsor, Wellsprout. Wellsprout is a 100% natural plant-based super greens powder formulated to help time-strapped professionals care for their gut health and energy. Wellsprout contains over 27 plant ingredients that have been carefully selected and scientifically formulated to promote gut health. Wellsprout is high in prebiotics, fiber, and phytonutrients, which helps to nurture a thriving gut microbiome. If you go to getwellsprout.com, that's GETwellsprout.com, you can claim a special offer of a welcome kit and 10% off any order with the promo code GUTInstinct. Full disclosure that I am a co-founder of Wellsprout, and my goal with the Gut Instinct series is to raise awareness and bring relatable information on gut health and health-related issues to the general public to help bring our lives and bodies into greater alignment. So you were just sharing your thoughts on the food industry. What are your thoughts about the healthcare industry and how it's approaching gut health at this point?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't get to finish that train of thought, but you're right. So food industry, processed foods, prioritizing the wrong things. And I'd say in the healthcare industry, there are too many denominations that aren't working together. So, if you have one problem, such as irritable bowel syndrome or PCOS or something gut related, for example, you head straight for the gastro and you're like, give me the antibiotics, give me the medications, and that's it, you're done. And maybe you'll have to take this medication for the rest of your life. But there are other aspects to treating the disorder which may not necessarily lie with the first option you think of, whether that's a gastroenterologist or a psychologist if you're feeling blue, or a rheumatologist if you're feeling pain in your joints and stiffness. There are so many other things that you can look at. Have you looked at your bloods? Have you looked at your gut health? Have you looked at a counselor or a therapist? Therapy needs to be holistic. It can't be it can't be split up into concrete solutions for different things. And I think doctors should advocate, or any healthcare professional for that matter, for a joint workable system, a kind of alliance, if you will, that will offer integrated healthcare solutions that are also personalized for different people. There will always be a place for mainstream Western pharmaceutical medication, but I think there's such a strong narrative for alternatives that will enhance the outcome you want even more, and perhaps even make these current Western therapies a lot more effective. So I think that's the issue with the current healthcare industry, which also just spends way too much money on making pure drugs that really just kind of cap the symptom but don't really fix the underlying matter.
Yeah, and it's I think it's a problem other people have pointed out before, that it seems that healthcare is approached in a rather fragmented way, an overly specialized way, and perhaps even that, perhaps maybe the incentives, there might be a problem of incentives about how there's perhaps more profitability to be found in dealing with reacting to the problem rather than preventing it. So what are some of your thoughts about, say, for example, the effectiveness of things like dietary interventions, yet perhaps it's not advocated enough in the way healthcare is being approached at this point?
Yeah, I think the direction we're headed in now is preventative, personalized solutions. And magically, this is actually where the healthcare and the food industries can join hands. Because now we're looking at healthcare being part of food and vice versa. So how can you change your diet to optimize your health? And then on the other end, how can you have tests be part of a cafe as part of their like healthy living system that they're advocating? You know, at Amli, we supply all these stool tests, and they're typically given to healthcare specialists such as doctors and wellness specialists or health coaches. And just the other day, the product manager and I went to a cafe, and they're like, you know what? We can sell this as part of our F&B offering. Like this can be integrated into this package where we do the test on you, and it spits out the report with some dietary recommendations using the foods from our cafe, and then you can make a meal plan from it. And they happen to be a very healthy living, health food, dairy, gluten-free situation kind of cafe. It doesn't need to be that way. I think this can be applicable to so many restaurants. And so there's that clinically valuable and commercial profit there too, for both sides. And honestly, why not? I think this is where we're heading. Food does represent a very important part of preventative medicine, because you are directly affecting your gut, and your gut produces all the upstream factors which control things that happen downstream and therefore affect your mood and your metabolism. And if that wasn't clear, what I mean by that is you, I don't know, eat enough protein day to day. And, you know, to someone else that may seem like a little bit rigid, or, oh, do you really have to do that? And of course, there's room for, you know, experimentation and relaxation here in life generally. You know, maybe you're traveling and you can't get as much protein as you want to from your chicken breast or whatever. But if you have it as a general guideline, what happens is, okay, you're consuming the protein, you're nourishing your gut lining, you're getting the protein needed to supplement your muscles and your gut and your brain, because it can make the hormones that affect your brain health, right? And that directly affects the downstream stuff, such as the mental health symptoms you might experience from something that you may think is not related to protein at all. So it's really controlling for the upstream factors here when it comes to gut health and with food, that does such a world of difference to your metabolic and mental health generally.
Makes sense. And I think that's something I found as well in my experience so far, that people have some idea of what they should be doing better with their lifestyles or their diets, but perhaps for one reason or another, maybe it's not convenient enough, maybe it feels like too much effort or too much work, and then they struggle to implement the changes that they would like to see in their own lives. So perhaps that's something I'll be curious to get your thoughts. And I think this is a topic that seems quite dear to your heart about, with all this information we've shared, it can be really overwhelming thinking about, oh, am I getting enough protein? Am I getting enough fiber? Am I consuming enough probiotics, prebiotics? But I know you are quite passionate about the idea of approaching it from a perspective of pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you take that lens to sort of connect these issues of, how do we have some fun with it? How do we make it something enjoyable, pleasurable, to care for yourself, to care for your gut health, to look after the mental and gut connection, right? How do we make it pleasurable?
Yeah. Pleasure is incredibly subjective. And it comes in so many forms that I cannot give you a formula for pleasure in that way. But it's so easy if you were to just think for yourself. And I'm also a big advocate of thinking for yourself, because in the age of AI and social media, everything is outsourced. We rely so much on what other people tell us to make decisions for ourselves, which is the most counterintuitive thing ever. Like, just sit down, look inside yourself for a second and think about what would I do with my time if I wasn't at a 9 to 5? What did I enjoy doing as a child? Or what did I do after school as a child? What did the older people tell me? Oh, you're really good at that thing. What is that thing that not only gets you excited, but makes you satisfied and gives you pleasure? Like, this is such a subjective thing. And pleasure is so important for reducing your stress response generally. And that directly ties into everything else that we've talked about. Our gut health, hence our mental health, and our overall metabolic resilience in a way. And we can follow all the rules that we see online, which in itself is very difficult, such as you must have enough protein. Oh, you must also have enough fiber. Also, you kind of have to wake up at 5 a.m. and get
Exactly.
like a 2-hour workout in. All these rules and regulations which make us think, oh, it worked for this person, that means it must work for me. And that is simply not true. One of my main gripes in the healthcare, diet, wellness industry generally is that there's a very common pattern that happens. Usually someone does something, goes on some special carnivore diet or does some crazy lifestyle thing, and it really works for them. They come back 2 weeks later and they're like, look at me, I've got abs and I've got like a sparkle in my eye and I've lost all this weight and I just feel so great and happy. And that is truly wonderful. The issue lies in assuming that this is the formula for everyone. And someone who's just looking at this, like, a 14-year-old girl on social media who has no idea about diet or lifestyle or exercise, follows this random person and maybe develops an eating disorder or is just too rigid in her life anyway and forgets how to have that pleasure. And so I'm a big proponent of merging this aspect of regulation and discipline in a way with pleasure, because the pleasure makes that regulation a lot more valuable. And if you don't inject these sources of pleasure into your life, and it can be anything from having time for yourself in the morning before like your kids are awake and your husband's awake and suddenly your whole day is just thrown out the window and you're just by yourself and you can read because as a child you loved reading books, and then suddenly you're 35 years old and you forgot how to read a book because you just don't have time to. When you purposely carve out time for these sources of pleasure, and this can take some time to experiment with as well, you are going within yourself and you're creating that space to actually enjoy the regulation that you've implemented in your everyday life. And it's this aspect of how discipline and pleasure are really two sides of the same coin that make for a much more satisfying and pleasurable life.
Yeah, so it's nearly as if putting the structure in place is required in order to allow yourself to have that room and space to have pleasure in how you're trying to implement better habits, trying to implement a healthier lifestyle. If it's not pleasurable and it's becoming a chore, maybe it's counterproductive because of how that stress that we put on ourselves might be affecting other parts of our body, perhaps.
Exactly. And if you have no sources of pleasure in your life and you're only eating chicken breasts and broccoli every single meal, which if it works well for you and you've decided this is the way you want to live life, then please go for it. But if you don't derive any pleasure from it and you don't enjoy it, then you're only going to increase the stress response in your body, which counters all the good stuff you want happening in your body anyway. So it's this balance which is really quite important and not really discussed in the health and wellness industry. All that I see online is do 1, 2, 3, and then you'll be this. Or do 4, 5, and 6, and then you'll be B. There's no recipe for a certain success, especially in this industry. And that's really key for people to know and to remember. And, and I'm saying this myself as someone who's quite firmly entrenched in the wellness industry. I've crafted kind of this course for optimizing women's health, with gut health as a huge component of that. And for health conscious people, generally, it's not a very unapproachable document because it incorporates habits which most healthy people have anyway. But I'm more fascinated by the order of the habits and how that could make a difference. That said, a key part of this course is this element of pleasure and self-care. I really endorse this idea of vanity if you're a woman, because if you take care of yourself properly, you are rewiring your internal state and your brain to a point where you really look at yourself and the quality of your life increases drastically. You look at yourself differently, I mean. And that in itself is such a magical thing, because if you're a woman, I think when you get to a certain age, you think, okay, now I have to do this and settle down and have kids, and then also I somehow have to have a job, and it's just a very stressful time of your life. But when you slow down, look inwards, and find sources of pleasure, or at least things which used to give you pleasure, you implement those into your life again, you literally rewire your brain and the way your body operates, because now your body is communicating with your mind saying, okay, I'm safe, I can release the stress, I can release the excess body fat that I'm holding on to and all this bad energy. And that's for the individual's benefit too. And I think that's quite a underrated and beautiful thing.
Absolutely. I think that's a pretty powerful thing, actually. And to pick apart that idea a little more, it sounds to me as if what you're suggesting here is a little bit of perhaps building up that self-trust in ourselves to be able to know what's right for us. But in this space, there's so much conflicting information coming from all these different sources that speak with such authority, and maybe even could be somebody with a lot of credibility behind them, at least in terms of the qualifications, only to find that what they're saying might not actually be backed up by the science. So how, on one hand, how should somebody parse through all that information and then come to a certain self-trust to navigate this very confusing space with all these different messages that are being sent by different people?
Yeah, very good question. And I think there are many elements to the answer. It's quite complex. Scientific validity does not exist in all the studies and random social media snippets you see online. You need to see where your information is coming from. It's really as easy as taking what you're seeing and with the help of PubMed or AI, looking at where this information is coming from. How many people have done this protocol? For how long? How was the study powered? How did they measure the clinical significance? Was it just through questionnaires, or was there like a quantitative element to it? These are all very important questions to ask if you don't come from a scientific background. And I am quite fascinated. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist. I just happen to be very interested in this kind of research, and I was exposed to it in Oxford's psychiatry department. So it was very interesting for me to observe. But identity-based thinking is also severely underrated. So knowing where your sources are coming from and also associating who you are with the habit you want to implement is incredibly transformative. With all the rules that are surrounding you and all the things you want to implement into your life, you can pick the ones that you know are approachable, or just one or two that you think you can integrate into your life, such as, I'm going to try to not drink for a week, because even though red wine isn't so bad for your gut, chronic drinking does disrupt that gut-brain signaling and cause a whole bunch of inflammation and stuff you don't want in the body. So it can be simple as, okay, let's try 3 days without alcohol. But you don't have to frame it as, I'm taking this thing out of my life. It can be, I have all this other choice to choose from, and I just so happen to be someone who doesn't drink that much. I am the kind of person who cares about his gut health. I am someone who understands my body very well, and my body trusts me. And this is very important for when you feel like you've slipped up. Because it's so common to follow a set of rules and regulations, and then there's one day where you miss one out of those 5 things you want to do, and you're like, I'm just not good enough, or I can't do it. I'm wasting my time, essentially. But failure is always one step towards progress and success, however you define that success. And I think failure is simply data.
I like that.
What made you have 5 drinks that night that caused you to slip up? Why do you think you gave in that specific point in time? Did you really feel that bad the morning after, or did you actually feel all right and you're suddenly realizing maybe this is something I can still keep in my repertoire? This is all data that you can collect about yourself, and this will help you fine-tune your personal set of health and lifestyle optimization techniques and tricks. I actually completely forgot the actual question you were asking me, but
Okay, we're just running with the
self-trust. Yes. So when you have this clear gut-brain signaling, it also helps cement that sense of self-trust. But if you also go in with the mindset already of, I want to trust myself and I'm someone who trusts my body, these 2 things help. So going in from the thinking point of view, like I think this way, I identify with being a certain person, and then going in from the gut health point of view of, I want to nourish my gut to the extent that I have this clear signaling, less inflammatory noise, and thus better trust in my body. Doing both at the same time is a great way to start.
I think that was one of the big takeaways I had when I read Atomic Habits. And at first I thought it was going to be a lot about tips and tricks about how to build better habits. But one of the key ideas was that actually it starts a lot with the identity, and actually from your self-concept, how you conceive of your own identity, that's where the habits then flow. I guess to get your thoughts on perhaps from a gut health perspective, maybe, or however you would approach this, that people that believe being harsh on themselves is the way to make a change, people that are very self-critical, what would you have to say to them when it comes to thinking about how do you actually implement changes you want to see in your life?
Excellent question. Excellent, because I've seen this play out in my own life plenty of times. I used to have a reminder on my phone that said, get your shit together. What are you doing?
And especially men, I think a lot of them would
Yeah.
try to beat themselves up, and they think that's the only way to have real change in themselves.
Exactly. I think men specifically also are very good at bulldozing their way through something to get to an outcome, which is great if you're trying to run away from a lion. But on a day-to-day basis, if you're trying to obtain a holistic health outcome, you should approach it a bit differently. It's good to be strategic. It's good to have goals and ambition, but from a wellness perspective, you can't go in with that bulldozing tactic. So I would say, it sounds incredibly cliche, be kind to yourself. You can talk to yourself like a best friend. You can tell yourself, this is the person I want to be, and I'm going to try as best as I can to get to where I want to be, because I'm now going to associate my identity with this 2.0 version of myself. And if I slip up, that's probably because I'm human with human-based behavior and human nature that will inevitably crop up during moments of weakness. And I'm going to start tracking the slip-ups or the so-called failures as data and understand the circumstances in which these happen, so I can better troubleshoot for them later on, instead of just telling myself all the time, oh, you're such a stupid piece of beep all the time. It's so much easier to resort to self-criticism and self-hatred almost than it is to be kind. And it's talked about a lot in mainstream media, talk to yourself nicely, be positive. But there is so much truth to it, because it actually brings out results.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask, is perhaps somebody listening to this might say, oh, but I know that being harsh on myself gives me results. Is there science and research behind how being kind to yourself actually gives better results?
Yeah, absolutely. Positive psychology exists for a reason. And it's because there is a definitive correlation between being kind to yourself and being understanding and doing the same towards other people and positive health outcomes generally. I think this also extends to social bonding, being able to have someone to talk to about your health problems or some issue you're facing in life, which then can consequently affect your health. They did this really famous study in the US quite a long time ago called the Rosetto study, and they put all these older folk in a home, and they all became really close, and they all lived much longer than expected. And this is in the circumstance of being in a home where a lot of old folk refuse to go to, because they're like, oh no, I'm just going to be around nurses and it's super sterile and boring and awful. Also, they weren't served the greatest food. They weren't doing push-ups and pull-ups and cool exercises all the time. They were just living a very simple, positive life. And they ended up living much longer than expected. So I think there's something to be said about positivity and encouraging positivity in other people as well. Definitely. I grew up quite anxious with quite a bit of negative self-talk as well. And that did nothing for my own health outcomes. I'm also human now. I don't stick to my own health tracking and goals all the time, but that's also because I'm human. It just so happens that with some of the lifestyle habits I've integrated and stacked over the years, these have produced very exciting, beneficial, and interesting effects on my brain and my body that I want to share with other people. But it's not to say that what has worked for me from a scientific health point of view will absolutely 100% produce the same results in yourself. But I can for sure say, after all that, the gut plays an incredibly important role. Yeah.
Makes sense. Fantastic. So we're wrapping up soon, and I wanted to ask you a bit about the book that you're writing right now.
Oh, yeah.
That's called Gutsy, and it's coming out soon. So could you share a bit about how you came up with the idea for this book, Gutsy, and what would you like to share about some of the ideas inside?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. It came from the story we were talking about, really, on my previous eating issues and then the force feeding and understanding gut health and how it can help repair that relationship with my body and my mind, and how gut health really is the most, to me and from my experience, the most underrated factor in improving your health as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And when I made these certain tweaks to my gut and lifestyle changes as well, I experienced less bloat and brain fog and fatigue, all of these things which I was experiencing heavily throughout my university life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just trying to distract myself really with work and actually a pretty booming social life, but I would come back home at the end of the day and just not feel myself and not connected to what I was doing and my body generally too. So Gutsy is essentially a mix of personal insights from my past with scientific anecdotes to support the differences I made lifestyle-wise that produce a certain effect. And so once again, not a formula for health or even for gut health specifically, but it's just a personal story I'd like to share. And I think some women could really benefit from implementing some of these things into their own life to optimize their mental health, their physical health. I went from being incredibly underweight to overshooting my target weight and completely feeling disgusting and bloated and brain foggy all the time, to understanding gut health, and now I honestly feel and look the best I've ever been. So that transition sounds perhaps superficial because I touch on the aesthetic element of that change, but the cause of that change is rooted firmly in the gut and really nothing else. And that's not a superficial thing at all.
Absolutely. I think that journey that you'll be sharing in Gutsy, I think from what we've heard today, it's really quite moving, and I'm very excited to see when you release this and how it's going to resonate, I'm sure, with many people who are going through similar challenges.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
I think to wrap up, I wanted to perhaps end on this last question for you. There was a line I saw in one of your recent Substack posts, The Art of Well-Being, that really resonated with me. And I thought perhaps you could share maybe a few last words on what this means to you. So it said that restoring my gut health became pivotal in reconnecting my mind and body in that last arrow transition, a connection I had lost through years of trying to control my body rather than listen to it. So perhaps you could share a bit with us now about how do you think about, how do you relate to your body now perhaps, and how do you think about this mind-body connection?
Yes, the mind-body connection via the gut is the first thing I listen to in any situation, be it a stressful or non-stressful one. The gut is truly our second brain, and without it, I don't think I would have repaired that connection so easily. I think it's a lot easier as a grown adult to think you have control over many aspects of your life. Like things need to be done a certain way and executed a certain way, and that's not wrong. And from a work perspective, I think that's actually very efficient. Like, okay, I want to do this. How do I get to point A, point B? I need to do this plus this. That's great and that's efficient. But when it comes to your body, there are just so many moving parts, and control, which leads to stress, which leads to disrupted stress management response, and therefore wreaks havoc in your body and disrupts that signaling you want to restore, is totally counterproductive when it comes to maintaining that mind-body connection and regulation you want to keep in you. And so I advocate for a resetting of the mind-body signaling, which then leads to repair of the mind-body connection. And then you can further enhance this connection with lifestyle techniques, with such as specific foods, your diet, and really going inside yourself instead of outsourcing everything to external factors like diet and exercise.
Or expert opinions about how you should be living and what you should be doing, maybe.
Yeah. Something I noticed when talking to lots of doctors over the past couple of years is that a lot of them don't really know how to look inside themselves as well, and they don't really understand gut health, but they understand how to diagnose very well. And
it's nearly as if it's the hammer they know how to use, and every problem becomes a nail.
Exactly. And so what I want to teach people is to listen to themselves first and foremost. Maybe you had a really stressful day and you're finally sitting down to eat dinner and you're not feeling good. You just have to take a few really deep breaths before you enjoy the food. Also, the way you receive and metabolize food is completely different when you're regulated and de-stressed as opposed to when you're just trying to frantically eat it on the go or something. That's quite important. And that stress response in itself causes a physiological change within you, and that's not what you want either. So people just need to listen to themselves and go from there. Okay, I'm stressed. Let me take a few deep breaths before I enjoy this meal or before I talk to my partner and explode. I'm not feeling clear-headed right now. Instead of resorting to mountains of cookies, I'm going to take a walk because that strengthens the gut-brain signaling and makes me feel more clear-headed and peaceful, as opposed to gross and bloated after eating 2 sleeves of cookies, for example.
And so I guess to perhaps contrast it with that word, you said that perhaps at the time what you were trying to do was to achieve control. So if you were to leave us with one last word for top of mind, right? Instead of control, what should it be rather than control?
I would say balance. Balance. Considering that interplay between discipline and pleasure we talked about earlier, it's the same thing. Interplay meaning that balance. And you can achieve that balance by carving out those pockets of pleasure and then choosing specific lifestyle methods that you for sure want to implement in your life and are going to be approachable and doable.
Fantastic. Balance, you've heard it here, with Dr. Alexandra Lim joining us on this episode of the Gut Instinct series. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Lim.
It was such a pleasure.